Hello, I hope everyone is doing well this morning. My name is AJ Harris, and I am a Peter Buck postdoctoral fellow in botany. And I want to talk to you today about my work on maples with some emphasis on the Northern Hemisphere, or the North America. So what I really like about working on maples is their diversity. It's the thing that gets me excited about them and gets me up every day. Some of you have probably experienced some of the diversity of maples. They are very prevalent right now because their leaves are changing beautiful colors. Maples are diverse in terms of their bark. You can see here green bark and some red. They are diverse in terms of their leaf shape, so very classic maple leaf shapes up there in the top corner, but also leaves that are much more like ironwood, shown there in the center, and some palmately and pinnately compound leaves as well. Also, diversity in their fruit form, so fruits that are different colors, shapes, and sizes. Acer is also very interesting, or maples are also very interesting, in that they have a very diverse fossil record. And here I'm showing you two examples. These examples are 5 million years old and 55 million years old. And what's interesting about that is even if we go back 55 million years, and actually a little bit earlier, maples looked a lot like maples. So the other thing that's really interesting about maples is the fact that they are very evolutionarily isolated. So their closest living relatives, which I'm showing you here, are Dipteronia. And Dipteronia really look quite a lot different from maples. They have long pinnately compound leaves that I'm showing you there in the lower corner. And they have disc-like fruits, so those fruits are winged, but they are wings, circular wings surrounding a small achene. And then if we take another step back, we're out in the Buckeyes, Aeschylus, think Ohio Buckeyes here, and those look really different from maples. They have big old fruits that are going nowhere quickly, palmately compound leaves, which are pretty uncommon in Acer, and maples have radially symmetric flowers, has some implications for pollination, and we have bilaterally symmetric flowers in Aeschylus and close relatives. So thinking about this in an evolutionary context, I'm showing you Acer and Dipteronia, which comprise a taxonomic tribe, Acerae, up at the top there in the phylogenetic tree, and at the bottom, Buckeyes, Hippocastinae. So you see Aeschylus there, the classic Buckeye, and its close relatives. If you look down that phylogeny, or that of the terminals there, I've placed the number of species out to the side. And one of the things that you should notice is that Acer maples are much more diverse than any of their close relatives. And that also gets me very excited about them. The other really cool thing about maples is that they exhibit a classic pattern of disjunction in the Northern Hemisphere. And so the Acer, along with Dipteronia, has a discontinuous distribution in the Northern Hemisphere, shown there in dark green on the map at the top. And that's despite the fact that oceans and mountain ranges divide that range. At the bottom, you see a map of the distribution of Buckeyes, which is actually quite similar, and this pattern occurs in many plant groups. There are 9 species that occur in North America. Most of the diversity of maples, as is typical for these disjunct groups, occurs in Asia. So since there's only 9 species in North America, why do I care about North America? Well, as it turns out, most of the diversity of maples has some representative in North America. So that includes really cool bark, really different leaf shapes, and different sizes, shapes, and colors of fruits. The oldest fossils of Acer and all of the fossils of Dipteronia are also found in North America. And so to really get at diversification of maples in North America, I have started working on creating an evolutionary tree of maples, sort of a backbone framework from which to work. Here I'm showing you some of the results of that. So that purple dot and everything forward of it are things that have traditionally been considered within the Acerae, so maples and Dipteronia group. And what's really important about these trees, I'll just highlight one thing for you here, and we've done some representative taxonomic sampling. But what's really important here is that within that group, evolutionarily speaking, Dipteronia, which looks really different from maples, is nested within it, evolutionarily nested within it, evolved from within maples. In both of these single copy nuclear gene phylogenies individually. And again, that's really cool because these things look pretty different from maples, so we would not have expected that. Now, I do want to comment briefly on the Northern Hemisphere because I told you that or rather North America, because I told you that I would. In North America, we have 8 lineages of maples, and by 8 lineages, I mean taxonomic units that have traditionally been considered distinct from one another. I'm showing you pictures of those here, and each of those taxonomic units, or each of those distinct lineages, is represented with a colored dot Over here in this rather complicated phylogeny, which is a typical evolutionary tree just bent around, I'm showing you where those lineages occur with colored arrows corresponding to the colorful dots. And here, the important point is each of those North American lineages of Acer have a close relative that is not North American. So at least 8 events are needed to explain this, the diversity of maples in North America. And I'll just conclude by saying that we're doing 2 things here. We're continuing to work on the backbone phylogeny or evolutionary relationships in Acer, using more representative sampling across the taxonomic groups and using next generation sequencing data. We'll also use some pre-existing data from online repositories to look at the relationship between traits such as fruit form, leaf form, whole tree form, and diversification in North America. And with that, I'll just mention these incredible people who have helped me out a lot and sources of funding. Thank you. So the question is about what is the fruit form of the Dipteronia, the outgroup, or supposed outgroup that's actually an in-group. And can I go back through my slides here? All right, so this is very much like a maple fruit. This is a small achene, so a hard part, just like maples have, but instead of an elongate wing, this is a wing that's actually around the fruit, so a circular disc around the fruit, and these are presumably, dispersed by both gravity and wind.
Of course, AJ, I'm going to ask you, why maples? Or why trees at all?
Right. So one of the things, actually, my real interests are in biogeography, and one of the things that I mentioned to you during the talk was that I'm excited by maples because they have a disjunctive distribution in the northern hemisphere, and that distribution is really common among other kinds of plants. So like maples' close relatives, the buckeyes, but actually found across the plant kingdom, outside of flowering plants and so forth. And what's really exciting about that to me is biogeography is not only a question in and of itself, but it's been used to address other kinds of scientific questions. So in fact, one of the reasons that Darwin was able to propose his theory of evolution is because he observed, the biogeography of species in South America and other places. Wegener came to a realization about continental drift because he observed the biogeography of living and extinct organisms. And so biogeography is a super fascinating topic to me because it is a question in and of itself, but it's also a means to answer really other kinds of really exciting scientific questions. So maples just represent a really good group to study that in. So I think from an evolutionary perspective, some of the, and maybe predating human activities, some of the volatiles that compose saps, my understanding is, and please grab the mic away and correct me if I'm wrong, but some of the volatiles that compose the saps that he's interested in may have function in, of course, keeping away some insect pests, so preventing things like herbivory, but could also have function among higher latitude plants or extremely low latitude plants in regulating temperature, particularly in things that have above ground stems, so almost acting like a coolant system or an antifreeze system rather for pines and things. For plants that contain high loads of bricks, so lots of sugars, sometimes we attribute that to their relationships with their pollinators. So they're producing quite a lot of sugar that's really desirable that's going to be ultimately exuded and be really desirable for pollinators. In maples, that's a great question. I want to give that some more thought because they're wind pollinated.